Lusail Stadium, Qatar. December 2022. The score is 3-3. Extra time. A World Cup final between the two best players the sport has ever produced, on opposite sides, playing the greatest final in the tournament's history. Lionel Messi, 35 years old, chasing the one thing his career had always lacked. Kylian Mbappé, 23, having just scored a hat-trick in a World Cup final. The fate of world football's most prestigious trophy is going to penalties. Jubilation for one half, heartbreak for the other. This is what the World Cup does. It takes 92 years of football, all its beauty and heartbreak and genius, and compresses it into moments like this one. This is the story of how we got here, from start to finish, how the FIFA World Cup became the greatest show on earth. Era 1, the founding years, 1930 to 1950. A dream, a steamship, and the first champions. It started with a French lawyer who believed football could save the world. Jules Rimet had watched Europe tear itself apart in the First World War and came out the other side with a conviction that felt almost absurd, that a football tournament could reconcile nations. He was elected FIFA president in 1921 and spent the next 7 years pushing for a professional world championship, one that would include the best players on earth. Not just the amateurs the Olympics allowed. In 1928, at FIFA's Congress in Amsterdam, he finally won the vote, a World Cup every 4 years, starting in 1930. However, a vital problem emerged immediately. Nobody wanted to go. Uruguay had just won back-to-back Olympic football golds in 1924 and 1928. Their centenary of independence fell in 1930. And they offered to pay all travel and accommodation costs for visiting teams. It was a generous offer. The voyage from Europe still took 2 weeks, each way across the Atlantic, and the world was sliding into the Great Depression. Most European associations simply refused. Rimet personally guilt-tripped 4 nations into attending: Belgium, France, Romania, and Yugoslavia. He sailed with them aboard the SS Conte Verde. 3 national squads sharing the same ship, heading towards something that had never existed before. 13 teams, 7 from South America and 4 European, one brand spanking new World Cup. The final was Uruguay against Argentina. Fierce regional rivals, politically charged, emotionally fragile. Uruguay came from behind to win 4-2 in front of a booming crowd. The world had its first champions. Rimet had his tournament, but he had no idea what it would become. The 1934 World Cup in Mussolini's Italy cast an early shadow. Fascist imagery on every wall and allegations of political pressure on referees. Uruguay, furious at Europe's 1930 boycott, refused to defend their title. Despite the dodgy circumstances, Italy became the first European country to lift the trophy. Perhaps a dubious victory, but the history books won't care. By 1938, the political situation was so volatile that the Austrian Football Association sent FIFA a telegram reading, "Sorry to cancel World Cup enrollment. Austrian Football Federation is gone." The Second World War arrived 14 months after Italy lifted the trophy again, and the World Cup disappeared for 12 years. When it came back in Brazil in 1950, it broke a country's heart. The Maracanazo Stadium in Rio was brand new, built for exactly this moment. The crowd for the deciding match against Uruguay is estimated at 200,000, still the largest ever to watch a football match. Brazil needed only a draw. A Rio newspaper had already printed a front page declaring them world champions. Uruguay won 2-1. Brazilian playwright Nelson Rodrigues compared it to a national Hiroshima. A 9-year-old boy in Bauru listened to the result on the radio and watched his father, a proud man, a footballer himself, cry in the face of the defeat. He later said he promised that day to win a World Cup for him. The little boy's name was Edson Arantes do Nascimento. The world would come to know him by one syllable: Pelé. Era 2. West Germany, the Three Lions and Pelé, 1954 to 1970. Genius, beauty, and the greatest team ever assembled. By 1954, the World Cup had found its first great rivalry, and its first great shock. Hungary arrived in Switzerland as the most dominant team on earth. 42 wins, 7 draws, 1 loss in 6 years. Ferenc Puskas, Nandor Hidakuti, a fluid attacking system that had humiliated England 6-3 at Wembley in 1953, what the press called the match of the century. In the group stage, they crushed West Germany 8-3. The final felt like a formality. However, West Germany had new boots. Adi Dassler, who would go on to found Adidas, had developed screw-in studs suited for the heavy, wet conditions of Bern. A small detail that would turn the wind of fate. Down 2-0, Germany came back to win 3-2, a game labelled the miracle of Bern. For a country still rebuilding from the rubble of war, the victory became a founding myth, proof of recovery, of a return to prosperity. Football gave West Germany something no politics could yet provide: hope. 4 years later in Sweden, an even bigger story arrived on the world stage. The arrival of a 17-year-old Pelé, the boy who had promised his crying father he would win a World Cup. He scored the winner against Wales in the quarter-final, a hat-trick in the 5-2 semi-final demolition of France, 2 more in the final against the hosts, a swerving volley, a late header, Brazil 5, Sweden 2. He sat on the pitch at full time and wept, teammates holding him up. In 1962 in Chile, Pelé was injured early, and Brazil had to rely on Garrincha, the winger they called Little Bird, whose dribbling and 2 goals in the semi-final against the hosts carried them to back-to-back titles. Brazil were becoming something the world had never seen, a dynasty. Then came 1966 in England, and a footnote that says everything about how this tournament operates. 4 months before kickoff, the Jules Rimet trophy was stolen from a display in Westminster. 6 security guards, glass case, gone in broad daylight. Scotland Yard investigated. A ransom note arrived. FIFA quietly commissioned a replica in case it was never found. Then a dog named Pickles, out for a walk in South London, sniffed at a newspaper parcel under a garden hedge. Inside, the trophy. Pickles was invited to England's victory banquet. He gladly attended. On the pitch, North Korea, a team nobody had heard of, beat 2-time champions Italy 1-0 to reach the quarter-finals. At Goodison Park, they went 3-0 up against Portugal inside 25 minutes before Eusebio scored 4 goals in a 5-3 comeback, finishing the tournament with 9 and the Golden Boot. But it wasn't enough to beat England in the semi-finals, as England would go on to beat West Germany 4-2 at Wembley Stadium. But the true peak of this era, arguably the peak of the entire 92-year history, came in Mexico in 1970. Brazil's front 5 at the 1970 World Cup were all natural number 10s: Jairzinho, Pelé, Gerson, Tostão, Rivellino, and somehow Mario Zagallo molded them into a devastating unit that averaged 3.2 goals per game. Pelé nearly scored from the halfway line against Czechoslovakia. He dummied Uruguay's goalkeeper without touching the ball. In the final against Italy, already 3-1 up, captain Carlos Alberto received a pass on the right, took 1 touch, and struck the ball clean to give Brazil a 4-1 victory. The final tournament before they changed the trophy to its modern design, this era belonged to Brazil and Pelé. The young kid from Bauru kept his promise, twice, no less. Era 3, Cruyff and Maradona, 1974-1990. Total football, dirty wars, and the hand of God. The 1970s introduced a new idea to the World Cup, that a team without a single superstar could be the best team in the tournament. Johan Cruyff's Netherlands arrived at the 1974 World Cup in West Germany playing total football. A fluid system where every player could occupy every position, where shape was a starting point rather than a rule. In the Munich final against the hosts, the Dutch took the lead before any German player had touched the ball. Cruyff dribbling through, winning a penalty, Johan Neeskens converting. But West Germany came back to win 2-1. Cruyff never played in a World Cup final again. Total football had changed football forever and still not won the World Cup. 4 years later came the darkest chapter in the tournament's history. Argentina hosted the 1978 World Cup under General Jorge Rafael Videla, a military dictator who had seized power in a coup in 1976, and who was, at the time of the tournament, running a systematic program of torture and murder against political opponents known as the Dirty War. The Navy School of Mechanics, ESMA, where approximately 5,000 prisoners were held and roughly 150 survived, was a 10-minute walk from the monumental stadium where the opening match and the final were played. The junta poured money into the tournament. International boycott campaigns failed. No team withdrew. The most controversial match came in the second group stage. Argentina needed to beat Peru by at least 4 goals to reach the final ahead of Brazil. They won 6-0. Reports later surfaced of grain shipments, unfrozen assets, and claims that Videla himself visited the Peruvian dressing room before kickoff. Argentina beat the Netherlands in the final. The regime celebrated, and the tournament left a stain that has never entirely faded. The 1982 World Cup in Spain brought the tournament back to the light, but not without its own controversy. Brazil's 1982 side with Zico, Socrates, and Falcao is one of the great teams never to win the World Cup. They played some of the most joyful, attacking football the tournament has ever seen, and were eliminated 3-2 by Paolo Rossi's hat-trick for the eventual champions Italy. In the semi-final between West Germany and France, German goalkeeper Harald Schumacher smashed into French substitute Patrick Battiston, who lost teeth and suffered damaged vertebrae. No foul was given. The tournament expanded, the football dazzled, and at times the decisions appalled. Then came Mexico, 1986, and Diego Maradona. The quarter-final between Argentina and England was never just a football match. 4 years after the Falklands War, 649 British and 649 Argentine military personnel dead, this was the first major encounter between the two nations on any stage. Maradona scored twice within 4 minutes. The first, a handball past Peter Shilton that the referee missed. Maradona punched the ball into the net and ran away celebrating. He later described it as a little with the head of Maradona and a little with the hand of God, a quote delivered with such brazen satisfaction it became as famous as the goal itself. The second, from his own half, dribbling past several England players, rounding Shilton, slotting the ball into the net. 60 meters, 11 seconds. Later voted the greatest goal ever scored. 2 goals in 4 minutes, one an act of cheating, one an act of genius. Is there a better to sum up one of football's greatest ever players? Argentina beat West Germany 3-2 in the final. Maradona received the golden ball. The World Cup had found its defining anti-hero. Italia 90 gave the tournament 2 of its great unexpected heroes. Salvatore Schillaci, Totò, was almost unknown going into the tournament. 6 goals, golden boot, golden ball. He walked off the pitch after Italy's semi-final defeat in tears, and the entire country cried with him. Because for one summer, this ordinary man from Palermo had been the best player in the world. And Roger Milla, 38 years old, coaxed out of retirement, came off the bench for Cameroon 4 times and scored 4 goals, dancing at the corner flag with the pure joy of a man who could not believe he was still there. Cameroon became the first African nation to reach a World Cup quarter-final. 1990 was heartbreak for the Italian hosts and redemption for the West Germans, as they beat Maradona's Argentina 1-0 in the final. ERA 4. The commercial era, 1994 to 2006. Television, billions, Zidane, and a mystery that was never solved. By the 1990s, the World Cup had become something Jules Rimet could not have imagined, from a steamship in the middle of the Atlantic, the most lucrative sporting event on earth. Television rights, global sponsorship deals, and marketing packages turned each tournament into a multi-billion-dollar machine. USA 1994 showcased football's new ambitions and was immediately overwhelmed by chaos. Diego Maradona returned, scored a sensational goal against Greece, and was then thrown out of the tournament after failing a drug test. The final between Brazil and Italy finished 0-0 after extra time. The first World Cup decided on penalties. Brazilian victory came when Roberto Baggio, Italy's talisman, fired his decisive kick over the bar. He stood with his hands on his hips and stared at the sky. The image became one of sport's defining photographs. France 1998 produced one of the strangest pre-final dramas in the tournament's history. On the afternoon of the final, Brazil's star striker Ronaldo suffered a convulsive episode in his hotel room. Teammates recalled him collapsing, emergency medical treatment, a hospital visit. The team sheet submitted to FIFA listed Edmundo, not Ronaldo, before Brazil hastily resubmitted a lineup, with Ronaldo reinstated. He played, but he was subdued, disoriented, barely present. France won 3-0. Zinedine Zidane scored twice in the first half, both headers from corners, and Emmanuel Petit added a third late on. Zidane, born in Marseille to Algerian parents, had won the World Cup for France on home soil. He walked off the pitch the greatest player on earth. What had actually happened to Ronaldo that afternoon remains to this day unexplained. Ronaldo would return 4 years later to score twice in the final against Germany. His redemption in Yokohama is one of the great World Cup comebacks. In Japan and South Korea in 2002, he had 8 goals, Golden Boot, 2 in the final against Germany. The smile he wore after the second goal became the image of the tournament. Whatever had happened in Paris, it was buried now under Brazil's 5th World Cup victory. Germany 2006 was supposed to be Zinedine Zidane's farewell. He was 34 years old, playing his final professional match, and the final against Italy in Berlin began beautifully. Zidane chipping an audacious Panenka penalty off the crossbar, like he was playing the match in his back garden. Then, in extra time, after an exchange of words with Italy's Marco Materazzi, Zidane turned and drove his forehead into Materazzi's chest. Instant red card. 110th minute. Italy won on penalties. Zidane walked off the pitch past the World Cup trophy. He didn't look at it. The greatest player of his generation, in his final professional moment, undone by 10 seconds of fury. The image of that walk, past the trophy, into the tunnel, into retirement, is the most bittersweet exit the World Cup has ever produced. Era 5, the modern era, 2010 to 2022. Tiki-taka, the 7-1, and the greatest final ever played. South Africa 2010 was the first World Cup held on the African continent. But the football told its own story. Spain arrived with a system so complete and suffocating, it made every opponent look disorganized. Tiki-taka, short passes, total control, relentless possession. They scored 8 goals across 7 matches, the fewest ever by a world champion, and conceded only twice. No superstar, no single icon, just collective intelligence executed to perfection. The final against the Netherlands went to extra time. Then, in the 116th minute, Andres Iniesta controls the ball inside the box. Shoots. Goal. Another final heartbreak for the Dutch, a first World Cup for the Spanish. Football's next dynasty was cemented. In 2014, Brazil hosted again, hoping to finally exorcise the ghost of 1950. Neymar dazzled fans throughout the tournament, but was injured in the quarter-final. They were also without suspended captain Thiago Silva. In the semi-final in Belo Horizonte against Germany, the roof caved in. By the 29th minute, the score was 5-0. Germany had scored 4 goals in 6 minutes. The crowd fell silent in the same way the Maracanazo had fallen silent in 1950. That specific hollow silence of a nation in shock. The match finished 7-1. Germany's Miroslav Klose scored his 16th World Cup goal to become the tournament's all-time top scorer, surpassing Ronaldo. TV cameras found children sobbing in the stands, a defeat so embarrassing that even the Germans felt bad for them. Bizarrely, Brazilians were cheering for Germany a few days later when facing their bitter rivals, Argentina, in the final. Mario Götze would score late on, much like Iniesta 4 years earlier, to give Germany its 4th World Cup. Russia 2018 introduced a new dimension to the tournament: VAR. The first World Cup final to turn on a video-reviewed decision saw France beat Croatia 4-2. Kylian Mbappé, 19 years old, scored France's 4th, becoming only the second teenager after Pelé to score in a World Cup final. He was 19, he had a winner's medal. Football's next big superstar announced himself on the world's biggest stage. And then came Qatar 2022, and the final that the entire history of the World Cup seemed to have been building toward. Lionel Messi had won everything, the Ballon d'Or 7 times. Champions Leagues, La Liga titles beyond counting. The one absence, the one gap in his trophy cabinet, was a World Cup. Argentina reached the final against France. At 2-0 with 10 minutes remaining, it looked settled. Then Mbappé scored. Then, within 90 seconds, Mbappé scored again. A penalty, then a stunning volley, to make it 2-2. In extra time, Messi put Argentina back in front. Mbappé equalised from the spot to force penalties. 3 goals in a World Cup final. A hat-trick from the man who had already won it 4 years earlier. Argentina won on penalties. Messi lifted the trophy. The symmetry of it, Messi, 35 years old, finally holding the one thing missing, against a 23-year-old who had given absolutely everything to stop him. Felt less like a result and more like the tournament deciding to write its own perfect ending. What comes next? The 2026 World Cup. United States, Canada, Mexico, 48 teams for the first time. The biggest tournament in history, on the continent that produced the Maracanazo, the Hand of God, and Carlos Alberto's Thunderbolt. Mbappé will be 27. A 38-year-old Messi will be aiming to create more history with back-to-back World Cups. A 40-year-old Ronaldo will have one last chance to win the only trophy that has eluded him. Brazil want number 6, and England long to end their 60-year wait. The stories are waiting to be written. The drama is ready to take center stage. Jules Rimet crossed the Atlantic in 1930 on a steamship with 4 reluctant nations and an idea that felt naive. What he built became the most watched event in human history, a tournament that has hosted dictators and dreamers, geniuses and cheats, dogs who found trophies, and teenagers who kept promises to their fathers. Every 4 years, for 1 month, there is one shared story. One shot at glory and eternal football greatness. Are you ready? Subscribe to get the latest from the tournament and world football.